First thing, if you look around, you'll notice that there's nobody here from the church administration. They wanted plausible deniability for tonight, as
They don't want to deal with that.
tonight. Of course, they give it to me, right?
I'm out.
So here we go. And needless to say, when it comes to stranger things in the Bible, if you Google it, this is the one that comes up every time. It's the first thing that comes up on all of it. So I did an extensive search because we like to have some sort of a visual explanation of what's going on here. And I searched all over the internet to find a picture of 100 foreskins. I only found one picture.
Oh my God. Oh man, that was so scary. Oh my God.
Not too many people want to do that, right?
You were a little scared?
Now, the verses that we're talking about are from 1 Samuel 18:25 through 27. Deborah, do you want to read it for us?
Sure.
You can either way.
Saul replied, "Say to David, the king wants no other price for the bride than 100 Philistine foreskins to take revenge on his enemies." Saul's plan was to have David fall by the hands of the Philistines. When the attendants told David these things, he was pleased to become the king's son-in-law. So before the allotted time elapsed, David took his men with him and went out and killed 200 Philistines and brought them back their foreskins. They counted out the full number to the king so that David might become the king's son-in-law. Then Saul gave his daughter Michal in marriage.
So, first thing we want to do is, to try to figure out, first of all, why foreskins? I mean, it could have been anything. You could ask for the heads, you could ask for some other body part, but Saul asked for the foreskins. He's doing this because, well, we'll go into the foreskins. He did this basically because he wanted David to die. He wanted to kill David, but he didn't want to do it himself, so he figured if he sent him out to kill Philistines, they would kill him. The problem with it is, or the reason we go with the Philistines is, with the foreskins is, first I want to go over this. First of all, Josephus, anybody that's familiar with Josephus, the historian from the late 1st century, he rewrote 1 Samuel along with everything else in his book of Antiquities in volume 6. In his, he doesn't say foreskins. He said that David had to go out and get 600 heads. So it is a legitimate question why they have foreskins in here. Were they just being salacious? They just want us to draw our attention so we would actually read it? Or was it 600 heads like Josephus says? My research says that it probably was foreskins. And the reason for that was the Philistines were the only people in the area that didn't circumcise. And I know that we all think that it was just a Jewish thing in those days. But the evidence is out there that everybody in the area, with the exception of the Philistines, did circumcise. JSTOR has an article by Abraham Foss, it's Bible Archaeology and the Practice of Circumcision of the Israelite and Philistine societies. He states that circumcision, however, was practiced by many groups in the ancient Near East and is commonly accepted that if circumcision was used as an ethnic marker, it functioned mainly against the foreign Philistines. Next slide. Doyle, this is a unique picture. This drawing is from a wall painting in, I don't know what that place is, I couldn't say if I wanted to. But it was back in 2345 to 2182, and you can see that they were circumcising. Now, one of the weird things is me and Matt talked this over when I found this piece of evidence, and Matt's initial thought was, well, Abraham was the first person circumcised, and the different cultures around him started adopting that practice. Well, that works. That doesn't work in the timeline of what we thought of when the Exodus happened. Because if you look at the Exodus happening, the 432 years behind that, and it's way above that time. But now, if you go back to a couple weeks ago when I was talking about the possibility of having the Egyptian timeline wrong, then it falls into place. So that's another interesting piece. You see, his research shows that people from warmer climates circumcised and people from cooler climates did not. He states this practice was a coming of age ritual ceremony for males that happened at the entrance of manhood, with the exception that at some point the Israelites moved it up to the 8th day after birth, which appears to coincide nicely with Leviticus. And this is not a biblical article, but it's unique that they brought that up, that they moved it up to the 8th day, just as Leviticus required. Next slide. The Smithsonian Magazine, there's an article in Smithsonian Magazine that shows the DNA of the Philistines shows that they originated in Europe. By coming from a cooler climate, this would support the theory that the Philistines were the one group in the area that did not circumcise. Another interesting fact is that if you do a word search for uncircumcised people in the Bible, before the book of Jeremiah, the only time any people were called uncircumcised is when they were talking about the Philistines. So, well, that was interesting. So, that's the brief history of what happened there about foreskins and all that stuff. I don't want to go into this. So what I'm really here about, and we're going to look at the rest of the story here, all the way back from the beginning with David and take it up to this point. And there's some real interesting stuff here. This story is filled with the human experience, both the good and the bad. It has both positive and negative. There's hate, jealousy, victimhood on one hand, and yet there's honor, dignity, and loyalty on the other hand. If you read 1 Samuel, you'll see that there are some larger-than-life characters. You have familiar stars like the great prophet Samuel, the not-so-great King Saul, and the one and only King David, right? So those are the three big players. The character that stood out to me the most was the lesser-known Jonathan. He, in my opinion, has stolen the show in this whole, all of 1 Samuel. So first we'll review Saul's rise to the throne. Israel asked for a king like the other nations. Adonai anoints Saul to be prince over his inheritance. God gave Saul a new heart. Saul is inaugurated as king of Israel. Then we look at his descent. Saul angers God by mixing civil and priestly duties. What I didn't realize, and I must have skipped over this when I read 1 Samuel before, was Saul actually had his kingdom taken away from him twice. The first time was when he was fighting against the Philistines, and he got nervous because Samuel hadn't showed up to do a sacrifice and all this stuff. So he got nervous. Everybody was, his troops were dispersing. Everybody was getting nervous. Everybody was afraid. So he decides to go ahead and do the sacrifice himself. And Samuel showed up and explained to him where he went wrong. And God said, because you can't mix priestly duties with civil duties. The priest could do sacrifices. And at that time, God says the same thing to him that he said to him after the next one, was he would have his kingdom forever if he would have done this, but instead his kingdom will continue. Saul disobeys God, and God regrets making him king. And this is the one with Amalek. This is the one that everybody remembers. The one where he didn't kill everybody. He saved Agag, that's his name, King Agag, and some of the animals. David gets anointed with the Spirit of God falls upon him. The Spirit of God leaves Saul, and this is another interesting thing. An evil spirit from God comes over him. A lot of times we like to separate God from the evil, right? We don't like to include him in that part of it. But it says an evil spirit from God came over him. Next we go into Saul's jealousy of David. David kills Goliath. Jonathan makes a covenant with David. The women went crazy. They just got crazy night. They thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? They sang a song that said, Saul, what was the song here somewhere? Saul killed thousands, but David, tens of thousands. An evil spirit falls on Saul. He throws a spear at David. So what happened was, David came back. He was playing the lyre for him because the evil spirit made Saul nuts, right? So he's flopping and twitching all over the place. The only way he would settle down is if David played the lyre for him. This time when David was playing the lyre for him, it didn't work. The evil spirit fell for him, and he throws a spear at David, thinking, I will pin David to the wall, he says. Saul develops a plan to have David killed by offering his daughter into marriage if David could complete this one task. And that's the one we're talking about. He requested 100 foreskins as a price for his daughter, but David brings him 200. Now Saul had an obsession with killing David. He was not going to go away. In 1 Samuel 19, you see Jonathan warns David and promises to keep him informed of Saul's actions because Saul was trying to kill him. Jonathan tries to talk sense into Saul. Saul swears David will not be put to death. So it works. Jonathan talked Saul out of trying to kill David. David reunites with Saul. He comes back and he's playing a lyre for him again, right? The evil spirit comes over Saul during this time and he throws another spear at David. Saul sends a messenger to kill David, and his wife Michal, I don't know, warns him and sends him away to safety. Jonathan continues to help David. Jonathan and David devise a plan to protect David. Jonathan pleads with Saul on behalf of David. Saul throws a spear at Jonathan. So he wasn't too willing to forgive at that point. Now, just like I said, Jonathan's legacy. Jonathan's acceptance to David being anointed in his place. Now, that's a pretty big deal. Jonathan should have been the one in line to be king. But he knew God had anointed David, and he was perfectly fine with that. Jonathan continued to stay loyal to both his father and his friend. And that's tough stuff. I mean, especially when your dad's throwing spears at you. But he stayed by his side anyway. Jonathan himself was a great warrior. He went out and fought many battles and won his battles. Saul, like I said, Saul even tried to kill Jonathan twice, but he remained by his side. The first time was when Saul had made an order that nobody could eat the honey. Jonathan didn't hear the order, didn't know anything about it, so he stuck his staff into the honey and was taking a taste of the honey, and Saul wanted to be killed, but God stopped that. So Jonathan's character exhibits integrity, loyalty, wisdom, and courage throughout his life. These are the negative traits. He had hate. Saul's hatred for David consumed him. Victimhood. Saul never took responsibility for his disobedience to God. Every time, in both situations, when Saul got in trouble, he blamed it on everybody else. No personal responsibility at all. It was somebody else's fault. The people were going crazy. I had to satisfy them. That's why I didn't burn off one, right? The people wanted the sheep and the goats. How can I turn them away? No, yeah, this is what they wanted. No personal responsibility. Victimhood said Saul never took responsibility for his disobedience to God. He always has an excuse and blamed others. Jealousy. Saul was so jealous of David that even when it was clear that David was no longer a threat to him, he still wanted to kill him. And he even agreed, even when David had an opportunity to kill Saul twice, he didn't. And he said, "You're the king. and that loyalty to even the king, that really was not a king at that point, but he thought he was the king. He was anointed by God originally. And he backed off and said, nope, I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to walk away. Positive traits. Honor. Jonathan remained by his father's side even when he desperately disagreed with his actions. And that's hard to do. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but when you're stuck in between two people that you care about, and one of them is really, really messing up, and the other one's mad at him, it's hard to stay neutral and stay loyal to both of them, but he did that. Loyalty, Jonathan remained loyal to both David and Saul throughout. Dignity, Jonathan was a warrior and he died in battle with dignity, still side by side with his father. So, I don't know about anybody else here, but in today's society, this is the deal. Right now, what's going on in the world. This is the deal. Either you're with me or you're against me. There is no middle ground. You're going to be on one side or the other, and if you're on the other side, you're dirt, no matter which side that's coming from. This is, well, Andrea's not here, so I can say it. This is duality. The duality. She gets a little bit annoyed with Matt for saying that all the time, but this duality that we have, there's only one this way or this way. We already know, if we get into an argument, I already know what we're going to say. So I'm not even listening. You know, I've already decided what you're going to say, and it's not worth anything. So I'm just going to keep on going on. I've had to learn a lot since I've been with the gathering about this, because I naturally am that picture. I mean, I want to fight, I want to argue, I want to stand my ground, and I don't want to hear anything else about it. Hopefully I'm doing better. I've been working on it a lot. But I come from a family, I don't know about you guys, but I tell you a really weird thing, in our meetings all the time. Every time I turn around, Chris Conley's family is coming to visit me, right? Or this one's family's doing this one. I'm going to see my family over in Lafayette this weekend. And I thought, my God, aren't you people tired of them yet? I mean, in my family, we don't do that. and there's a good reason for it. I guess if you wanted to be nice, you could say my family was a very passionate family. But if you wanted to be just downright truthful, I had a very volatile family, okay? I don't remember ever having an event of any type, whether it's a wedding, a funeral, a birth, it doesn't matter. I don't remember one time that everybody in the family showed up. Because somebody was always on the outs. And if you even accidentally brought their name up, then you were on the outs too. Family events would end up being violent. I mean, there would be fistfights, everything. I mean, weddings, everything, funerals, they always were going to be fistfights. So, believe me, I can identify with this duality, this single mindset that there is no middle ground, because we just never had any middle ground. And also the loyalty of friendship. I have to say, and you know, until I got to the gathering, I never had anybody that I would really consider a friend. I had a lot of acquaintances. I had drinking buddies. I had all kinds of buddies that I ran around with. I did things with everything. I wouldn't stand in front of a mosquito to protect them. They were just people. They had nothing to me. And when I got here, and I can honestly say, I mean, I have a lot of people that I feel that type of loyalty to. So I guess it all comes from your background, but I'm sure even all you good people that have all these really nice little families and everything always went well, you still got stuck in the middle of things sometimes. Did anybody get that? I mean, you have a friend that's mad at somebody else and they're demanding you be on their side, they're mad at you if you don't agree with them. So that's what I wanted to talk about tonight, because that's what we're doing in the world right now. You've got to either be on one side or the other. you're either anti-cop or anti-BLM, you're a Democrat or you're a Republican. There is no middle ground. You're not allowed to be in the middle. It's against the rules right now. You get canceled. It's just absurd right now. There's no solutions when it's that way. You can't find a solution when it's that way. Nobody's going to come up with anything because nobody's listening to the other guy. So there's no middle ground. And we've got to find a way to keep the middle ground. I have been around for a long time. I've had liberal presidents, I've had conservative presidents, I've had liberal congresses and conservative congresses, and in reality, it's not changing a damn thing. My life has not changed one bit, no matter who's in the offices. So why would I want to get into a fight with a friend or hate somebody because they want to go with the side house that I want to go to? It just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know, anybody else got anything to say? Any feelings about any of this? Or?
So does it matter?
I'm sorry?
Does it matter to vote or not?
Well, the patriotic thing to say, of course it matters. In reality, I don't know if it matters or not. I mean, you only got two choices. One side's going to win. We just got done with Obama, then we had Trump, and before that we had Bush, and then we had Clinton. I mean, it goes back and forth, and everything remains the same. Have you seen, has anything been done with the lower ninth ward? Nobody's done anything for them. It's not one side does better than the other. Well, nobody does anything for them, right? It stays the same. Everything stays the same. There's still, you know, we've had conservative presidents with conservative congresses, and we still have abortion, right? We've had liberal ones. Nothing changes. They just, you know, they get everybody fired up, in my opinion. I mean, I say over my year. Have you seen it different in your years?
No.
No. So it's hard for me to get excited about any of these elections anymore. I used to say that we went from the party of John F. Kennedy to the party of Hillary Clinton, and from the party of Ronald Reagan to the party of Donald Trump.
Right.
Quite the difference.
But today, in today's world, it's so 50-50.
It
It's
is.
scary.
Yeah.
It never used to be that bad.
No.
I think it was 60-40, 65-35, but 50-50 is setting up a bad situation.
It does, and they got along for when it's something that can be done. John F. Kennedy worked with the Republicans to get stuff passed. Ronald Reagan passed a bunch of stuff with Tip O'Neill and the Democrats. I mean, they used to get stuff done with this. Even Bill Clinton got stuff done working with the Republican Congress. But right now, I mean, they'll both stand up and say, we have to, and I don't really care if this happens or not, but they'll both stand up and say, we have to give a stimulus check to the people. Well, they've been saying that for 2 months. And they're not going to do it, or they haven't done it yet. But they all claim that the world's going to end if they don't do it tomorrow, but if they don't do it, I don't know.
I think the bigger issue, the real one, as far as like, what do we do? How are we as people who love God? I think this is an issue that dates back to the beginning, and it's not specific to politics, not even remotely. So I have not been a very political person for very long, but a religious, and I mean religious in like a traditional aspect. I grew up in a very traditional religiosity was the mindset of this church. And you begin to realize things like information and being correct is more important than the person you're speaking to. And that, that's not just church, that's church, it's politics, it's music, it's studies, it's college, it's anything, because people are competitive and they want to be the best. And I think the importance as a community that desires to be, this is something that, I mean, for me, it's taken 2.5 years that I've been at the gathering. This is where that journey for me began. Where understanding and my mindset of a person that I'm speaking to, their life, regardless of what they think, what they believe, is exponentially more important than what I think, what I have come to understand. Because if I look back, a month ago I believed different things. And in a month, there will be new things added to the equation. But is all of those findings more important than the person that you're speaking to? You know, like, and that's honestly what it boils down to, is what are you conflicted about inside, and are you willing to lay that aside? I mean, Jesus, for example, my favorite passage of scripture is the woman at the well. Jesus had every excuse under the sun not to go speak to this woman. She was the opposite, she was the lowest, she was a Samaritan, and even more than that, she was the least liked in the Samaritan community. Like, she wasn't even allowed to go to the well with the other women because she was so frowned upon as a person. And Jesus went out of his way. It wasn't even part of his journey to go up to the top of Israel. He went out of his way. And I think that says a big thing, is like, how much of it is just your opinion, you know? Peel it back. Find the things that are truly important. And I think at the end of the day, I mean, that's why I wrote that song. Don't get caught up in how things are right now, because you'll turn around and you'll regret it.
One of the things that Matt taught me when I first got here, actually, even before I got here, when I was still out of the mission, was he would say, what's more important, Walt? Relationship or being right? And at that time, being right was the most important, but I'm working on it, right? And, you know, one of the other things that I learned through life is that you have to understand where the other person's coming from. Their perception is reality to them, whether it's your perception or not. So, for instance, I tell the story, and it's the truth. I was working down in St. Petersburg, and there was a guy I was working with. His name was Dimitri Hill. Dimitri Hill was 1996 MVP of the Final Four in Final Four games. He was about 7 foot tall, 6 foot something, big guy. But it had been quite a few years, and now he was a big this way too. So he's a great big guy, right? And we're working together. We're driving down the road in the truck, and there was a cop car sitting there. And he tightens all up, and I said, "What the hell's the problem?" He says, "There's a cop over here." I said, "So we're not doing nothing wrong. What's the big deal, right?" But for him, that was a big deal, even though he wasn't doing anything wrong. His perception was that the cops were a problem for him. Now, to him, that was the truth, because that was where he was coming from. For me, that was ridiculous. Why in the world would a cop bother me? I'm just driving down the road. I'm not doing nothing wrong. So sometimes it's hard for us to understand where the other person's coming from. So we immediately just disregard their opinion because it just sounds so silly. When I was in Saudi Arabia, I found out a little bit more about what it's like to be a minority. I mean, you know, one of the things that I used to be amazed with was people in the black community seem to have a bond that we didn't have. I mean, if there was a black gentleman walking down the street and another black gentleman walked down the street, they're like, "Hey, you know, how you doing?" Yeah. White guys would walk to the other side of the street. You know, you want to do with these people. You don't know who they are. You don't know anything about them, right? But there was a bond there that just didn't seem right to me, or it didn't seem right that we didn't have that bond. When I went over to Saudi Arabia, and I was one of the minorities. There was only a few white people there. We did the same thing. All of a sudden, you know, I saw another American, another white guy walking down the street. "Hey, buddy, I'm over here. You know, come over and talk to me." You know, and the feelings that, you know, while you're there, you have to go through security checkpoints and all this stuff all the time. And it's just that unknown that, you know, when are they just going to take you away? And they could take you out in the desert and they never even know you were gone, you know? So that gave me a better understanding of the perception of the minority here in the United States. I never understood it before. It just seemed so silly to me because I didn't have any problem with anybody else. I don't know why anybody would have a problem with them. So it was all imagined as far as I was concerned, but it isn't imagined. It's the real thing. So until I can understand that, I can't have a conversation. Because as long as I'm sticking to my guns, there is no problem. And as long as I believe that, and I refuse to look at it from another person's point of view, then we're never gonna find an area that we can work together with.
I was always taught as a kid that you need to listen twice as much.
Have to do the one.
As much as I talk, I have to listen a lot.
But I mean, that's the only way that you'll hear somebody and be able to make a rash decision or, you know, understand someone else. You don't always have that, talk, because if you're talking, you're not hearing anything.
I think one of the interesting aspects of this passage is, when we talked about it, that God changed, or it appears that God changed Saul's heart, and caused him to, lash out against David 3 times, and then against his own son as well. And obviously God knows, I don't know, when I read that, I think, well, God obviously knows best, and knows what needed to happen in order to have the right person leading Israel. Even though David made plenty of mistakes too.
One of the things that I got from it that I didn't talk about yet is that it appears that in the story to me, that God puts things in place, but he still depends on us to make it happen. God let David know, or put David in a position where he was around Saul and he could have killed him. David didn't kill him. So, like I said, Saul, other than one time I don't understand. One time that just doesn't fit is when Jonathan talked Saul out of killing David and reunited him, and everything was fine. And Saul seemed to be going along with that. And then God slapped him again with a little evil spirit, so he would try to kill him again, But mostly, and this is the way I sort of look at God, he gives us opportunities. But we have to do the work. He could have just wiped Saul out at any point he wanted to, made David king, and that would be the end of it, right? The other part that I didn't understand about it was the reason that David wanted to marry Michal was that that gave him the lineage to the throne, right? But he wouldn't have been in line for the throne because it would have been Jonathan, if that mattered, which I don't think mattered anyway. But it definitely appears to me that we have to do the work. That God's not going to just make it all go away for us. He's not going to make us trouble that we're seeing around on TV every night go away. He's not going to make anything go away. He's going to give us the heart, and we have to follow that heart to do our part. And as long as we do our part, we're okay. Jonathan did his part. It never got fixed. I mean, finally, David got killed. David died. Saul died. But God didn't fix the situation, and neither did Jonathan. They didn't fix the problem, but Jonathan did what he was supposed to do. And that's all we can all do. Just do our part.
The big but is, does God allow evil to come into your life?
According to that, it does. Now, I'll grant
You
you,
look at Job and you look at Saul.
right, and grant you, my copies here are from the Complete Jewish Bible, which tends to be more Jewish than some of the more other translations out there. And not all the translations say the evil spirit that came from God. It talks about something coming over him, but it doesn't say it was an evil spirit coming from God. But you know, what is it called? The two on your side? You know this, right? Come on. Come on, you guys all sit around here back all the time, and you're younger than me, you remember this stuff. But basically, the yeah, the evil inclination of, well, according to the Jewish people, we all have an evil inclination and a good inclination. It's almost like the cartoons with the little devil on one side and the angel on the other side. So that falls into that.
Well, it's interesting because that's the first, I'm reading the Jewish book of this book.
Okay.
And that's the first one I've ever seen it put like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? When I read it, I was interested in ask y'all tonight about it. But you can see from the Jewish perspective, it sort of cleans it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because he does allow evil to enter in, and you got to decide how you're going to handle that.
That's right.
I mean,
So,
it kind of happens, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know if it's the same words used, but,
I'm getting to look it up and see.
with Pharaoh and.
Exactly, he hardened his heart, right?
Right, hardened his heart.
Hardened his heart.
Said
Yeah,
over
same
and over
thing.
again, you know?
Same thing.
It sounds.
King James says, and it came to pass on the morrow, the next day, that the evil spirit from God came upon Saul.
Closer, King James, I know the NIV, I don't think had said it that way. And the King James is normally fairly close.
And he prophesied in the midst of the house.
So
Kind of interesting.
if you read into the story, that even came to a point where I think they were in Ramah. David was in Ramah, I think it was. And Saul sends a group, sends some troops that they were killing. And the troops get up there, and they was up there prophesying, and they started prophesying with him, and they wouldn't do it. He said three different times, he said, because they kept coming back and they didn't do it, because he said three different groups up there to do it. And then finally Saul goes up there himself to do it, and he runs into the same problem. He starts prophesying, gets naked, lays in the street, and everything else.
I mean, I'm gonna say too that it seems kind of fluffy, but, so often we tend to, it's our inclination to focus on the differences that we have with each other, instead of focusing on what we have in common. Instead of focusing on how bridges can be built instead of torn down. I mean, it's a major problem in the world right now, in our community right now. Gosh, I mean, personally speaking, I've had a situation just this year within my family that, where I'm sure some felt like Jonathan, stuck in the middle. And these are relationships that are close, that matter, and you don't want to see them destroyed. You want to see them continuing to go on. And that process, walking through that process, is taking a long time. I mean, I'm not sure how it's affecting the other person. I know it's affecting me, and how, and the questions I'm asking myself are along the same lines. If I keep focusing on the differences, what we don't have in common, that doesn't unite us. I have to change my attitude. Pray that, God can work in that other person's heart, but I know that I need him to work on my heart as well. I need to think about how much we have in common, how much, we did in the relationship in order to move forward. It's a humble process,